Hello, Asia, and hello, world. The implementation of electronic voting system for Indonesian voters overseas is currently being considered for the 2029 elections. The General Election Commission and the General Election Supervisory Agency have been tasked to review the implementation of an e-voting system for overseas voters to address challenges in holding elections for Indonesian citizens abroad. The adoption of e-voting systems is not new. Various forms of e-voting systems have been adopted in different jurisdictions in Asia, like the Philippines and India. The Philippines uses a paper-based ballot that is fed into a vote counting machine that consolidates the votes and transmits the results, while India uses an electronic voter machine used to cast votes. During the 2025 elections, midterm elections in the Philippines, internet voting was introduced for overseas Filipino voters, which I myself is included. There were particular challenges in the implementation of the internet voting system for overseas Filipino voters. Hoping to boost overseas voter participation, the Commission on Elections, however, only recorded 18.2% internet voter turnout, as several voters expressed doubts about the system, among other reasons. In recent elections, meanwhile, Bangladesh implemented an IT-supported postal voting process for overseas voters using a dedicated app to register, assist in casting the ballot, and tracking the ballot. The international idea in their policy paper, introducing electronic voting, essential consideration, said properly implemented, e-voting solutions can eliminate certain common avenues of fraud, speed up the processing of results, increase accessibility, and make voting more convenient for citizens. In some cases, when used over a series of electoral events, possibly even reduce the cost of elections or referendums in the long term. In this episode of the Election Observer podcast, we'll hear about the experience of the Philippines and Bangladesh and talk about key considerations, factors, and risks in deploying and implementing e-voting systems. I'm your host, John Antiquera, and we are live via ANFREL's Facebook and LinkedIn pages as well as via ANFREL's YouTube channel. The episodes of the Election Observer podcast can also be streamed later on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. With us today are Attorney Ian Michael Geonanga, Director 4 at the Office of Overseas Voting of the Philippine Commission on Elections, and retired Brigadier General Dr. Saleem Ahmad, the team leader of Bangladesh Election Commission's out-of-country voting system development and implementation project. I'll add them to the feed right now. Hello, Director Ian and Dr. Khan. Welcome to the Election Observer podcast.
Hi, John. Good afternoon. Good afternoon here from the Philippines.
Yes. Good morning to Dr. Khan in Dhaka right now, and lunchtime here in Bangkok.
Good morning. Good morning to you.
Yes. So we'll go straight to the questions. No, before I ask you about the e-voting system that was implemented for overseas voting for Bangladeshis and Filipinos, I wanted to ask first, what were your key considerations or factors that you considered in identifying and implementing what e-voting system to deploy? Maybe we can start with Director Ian.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, John. For the Philippines, so they're actually, before the 2025 elections, as you mentioned, the 2025 elections, we deployed internet voting for overseas Filipinos. So before that, we actually already started using e-voting, so electronic voting, using paper ballots, and then we have to deploy machines as well to all our posts all over the world. Um, in certain posts, we still had to do manual voting before. When we say manual voting, so the ballots are like just blank paper, and then the voters will have to list down the names of the candidates that they will be voting, and then it will be manually counted at the post during the end of voting. So as always, the main consideration for the Commission in choosing which mode of voting for overseas, it's number one, of course, we want to make sure that the method is secure. It should be able to retain the sanctity and the integrity of the elections, and uh, and also to consider the different setup of our overseas Filipinos abroad, because as compared to our Filipinos here in Filipinos in the country, the Philippines, wherein elections are being done in different public schools all over the country. So you could actually find like a voting precinct just within the block where you live, so it's kind of easier for you to go out and vote. But for our overseas Filipinos, the method before was that they have to go to the embassies and consulates in order to vote. So a lot of our foreign Filipinos, overseas Filipinos, they sometimes are located in very far areas, so it takes a lot of time for them to go to the embassies or consulates just to vote. Even if we actually have a month long overseas voting period for them, just going to the embassies and consulate, it takes time. It takes additional cost for them as well. Given the demographics of our Filipinos overseas, cost is a big issue too. And of course, our embassies and consulates, they are not really in the far-flung areas wherein most Filipinos would be. Majority of most, if not all of them, are in just in the city center. So, like for example, in countries like maybe I could cite a nearby country, Indonesia or even Malaysia, for example. We have an embassy in Kuala Lumpur, but there are of course a lot of Filipinos in the Sabah area of Malaysia. So if ever that they want to vote, they have to fly in to Kuala Lumpur just to vote. In Indonesia, we have two posts, one in Manado and one in Jakarta, but the Filipino diaspora is also scattered all around the archipelago of Indonesia. Even, for example, in areas like Hong Kong and Singapore, wherein it's just a very small area and wherein we have so many Filipinos there, the main challenge, of course, is actually coordinating with local governments, because in those areas, in some other similar areas as well, they kind of restrict or limit political activities from other jurisdictions. So we experience that whenever the queues start to be longer, or whenever Filipinos start to flock in areas during voting, they tend to get dispersed by local authorities, and we have no choice then but to follow, of course, right? And it's kind of frustrating for overseas Filipinos there, because usually they come in flocks because they always usually vote during weekends when their day off, and during
Yes.
weekends, of course, we have a lot of other individuals as well who are in those areas, so they tend to um, kind of interrupt the regular flow of the community. So they tend to get dispersed, and then chances are they won't vote anymore, right?
Yeah.
One other vote that we had was postal voting, but it
Mhm.
also costs a lot for us, because we have to pay for postal fees, um, of sending the ballots to the voters in their respective homes, and then for them to send back to the embassies and consulates to be counted. So all those considerations, the cost for the government, the cost for our overseas Filipinos, the time and effort for them to vote, um, have led for us, of course, to think of other ways that is allowed by law, to make sure that all our overseas Filipinos who want to vote will get that opportunity and be allowed to vote. So um, our commission and bank, the head of our agency, decided to pursue internet voting for 2025 in almost all of our posts back then. Yes, you're correct that we were able to get like 18% of our
Mhm.
18% turnout. So it's something that we are continually working on. So studying what the challenges that we have faced before. But it's of course a work in progress for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I must say, no, based on experience, I think it's the first time that I voted abroad. The last time I voted in the Philippines was during the 2018 barangay and SK elections. So that was a manual election. So coming from a manual election, although I voted with the e-voting system already in the Philippines, but coming from a manual to an internet voting was also quite an experience, because it's also quite convenient based on my personal experience, because considering that you have to go to a particular area to vote, it's so much convenient to just access a voting system right at your home in front of your computer. Yeah. Maybe we would also like to hear from Dr. Khan about the consideration in Bangladesh for overseas voting.
Thank you very much. In Bangladesh, the scenario is a bit different. What
Mm-hmm.
happened? This is the first time in national parliament election, which was held in February this year. We implemented postal voting IT supported system. We
Mm-hmm.
had postal voting earlier, but reality was that it was not very well exercised and implemented. So this time we had interim government, and they decided in the national parliament election, the overseas citizens must be able to cast vote. So key consideration number one is political will,
Mm-hmm.
national decision to allow the overseas citizens to cast their voting rights. This is number one. So, but in our case, we have there is a we have a law where we have postal voting, and in
Mm-hmm.
that law, not only overseas citizens, but in Bangladesh, the polling personnel, government officials
Mm-hmm.
who remain on duty, and because of their duty station they cannot go to their voting center, designated voting center in the like as per their home addresses, so they are also part of the system. Additionally, we have prisoners, the inmates. So there are four categories. In fact, they were within the postal voting system. And number one is overseas citizens, and number two, three, four is with the voters residing in the country, and is government officials, polling personnel, and the prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
So, keeping these all categories, what the other considerations came up. In fact, what happened? We developed the system within 3 months and went for enrollment. Reason was Bangladeshi diaspora is worldwide, so around 123 countries we have our populations dispersed. So within 3 months, we had to develop enrollment module of the entire system so that voters can register. Why we had gone for registration of voters? Reason is we have 13 million, overseas populations all over the world. But we,
Mm-hmm.
in our database, we do have national ID database, we have passports, birth registration database, but from there it was difficult to distinguish actually at that point of time how many voters are residing abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So voters is more than 18 years, so that is why we had to go for enrollment process. So after
Mm-hmm.
enrollment, during enrollment process, then the tracking of voting, many things came up. So but we had to consider few aspects like authentication of voters, integrity of vote itself, then how do you track each and every step of sending ballots and getting it back, and how the voters would get their return receipt of ballots when it is
Mm-hmm.
received by the polling personnel or electoral officials. So they need a confirmations too. In fact, in subsequent questions I will go for a presentation, a short presentation, where I will just give an
Yes.
overview about the entire process. Then by that it will be very clear. So other
Yes.
considerations are system design and architecture. It has to be with the modern technology. Then resilience of cyber attacks, reliability and availability. Very important aspects, because when you open your mobile app before 123 countries, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're exposed to cyber domain, and of course cyber attack minute by minute. So that is why how your system should adapt, how it should respond to incident and take care of the issue, so that it remains available for the voters at any point of time. The infrastructure itself is a big consideration. It must be secured, and it has to be very robust too. transparency and auditability, very very important, because if we like, there was an example of 18%, the vote cast by Filipino voters. I don't say that they lack transparency, but you know getting the trust of voters
Mhm.
is very very important, because they have to do something at their own, and they have to believe that this is transparent and I trust the voting system. So that is why this trust issue needs to be, there should be open access to audit at any point of voting, by citizens, by any IT firm, by political parties. So this openness is the key, so that they can challenge the system of the election process about e-voting, postal voting, IT support, and whatever it is. So this transparency is the key, and by that automatically, citizens, the voters would, have trust on the system itself. Then there are some legal aspects which needs to be considered. The legal aspects
Mhm.
of the, election commission who are developing and running the show, legal aspects of voters itself, so voters himself or herself, so that they don't also manipulate with the system. Legal aspects of auditing firm, they have to follow a guideline. So every legal, there should not be any legal gaps. That's my, issue as one of the considerations. And another thing, that the system is designed for voters, if it is yes or no, or if it has been designed for administrative convenience only. Has it been designed that okay, we apply it and let the voters cast their vote for administrative convenience only, and we say, we have our, political agenda. So that will not serve the purpose in e-voting or postal voting IT supported cases. So it has to be designed for voters as well as for administrative convenience. And most importantly, another two aspects I want to highlight about the digital literacy of voters. So that's very important, because the Bangladeshi diaspora who are, dispersed all over the world, there in fact we have category of, these diaspora voters. So digital literacy using smartphone, and we had applied, the short videos in between the processes, but still we
Mhm.
found that yeah, we need to make sure that digital literacy goes, to the voters education system. And
Mhm.
cybersecurity awareness, there are some tips we had put it in the mobile app, but we found that no, this sort of awareness campaign has to be undertaken regularly. And
Mhm.
because if there is a cyber breach, if a cyber attack, if a voter can, a voter, him or herself can also, can be part of that too. So that is why cyber security awareness tips, readiness, all this needs to be, in fact, informed to voters time to time. In short, in fact, these are the considerations which I highlighted, and other things I can take on subsequently. Thank you very much.
Yes, yes. As you've mentioned, we'll allow you to present more about the Bangladesh experience and also the Philippine experience. No, in my next question, because as I've mentioned earlier in the introduction, Indonesia has been looking into using an e-voting system for overseas voting. Countries like Nepal, and from what we heard from our colleagues as well in Maldives, are also looking into using e-voting systems for overseas voters. In your experience, as a way to help other election management bodies and key electoral stakeholders to map out their course towards implementing an e-voting system, what lessons have we learned in the deployment and implementation of e-voting systems? So, for the Philippine experience with internet voting in the 2025 midterm elections, Director Ian, what were your key takeaways that should be considered in terms of implementation and adoption?
Yes. Dr. Khan's mentioned one good point, really great point earlier about making sure that your electorate trusts the process.
Yes.
Because I think one of the challenges that we had in implementing internet voting for the first time in 2025 is really more on how our voters would react to that change in the process
Mhm.
how they would um, think of it, whether they would trust the new process or not. That could spell out whether they would actually participate in the voting, and if they participate, and when they participate, whether they would also trust the results as well. So it is really important for us to make sure that there is transparency in every step of the process, from the start of procurement of the system up to every step of the um, what we call this, configuring the every module of the system, the testing that we
Mhm.
done, and also of course from voting to counting, everything is auditable as well. So one of the main challenges that we had is of course there's a lot of issue on fake news on
Mm.
the first day of voting for us, because as I mentioned earlier, we have a 30-day voting period for overseas Filipinos.
Yes.
So noon time of the first day of voting, there was a lot of fake news that spread in social media regarding the process of the voting itself. They were saying
Mhm.
that um, they received ballot receipts that showed individuals that they did not really vote for, etc., etc. So for us, we had to act quickly as well. So we responded to those criticisms, to those fake news at the earliest opportunity, in order, of course, to get back the momentum of the people in trusting the system. Because if they would already think that the system is rigged from the very beginning, then of course chances are they will not vote,
Mhm.
um, or they would question the results.
Yes.
But of course, nobody questioned the results. So we believe that the Filipino people, the overseas Filipinos, have accepted the integrity of the system as well. And then the second thing to consider, of course, is voter awareness. It
Mhm.
is very challenging for overseas voting, and I think it would be applicable to all countries as well, implementing overseas voting, because it's as compared to local elections, wherein you have like the whole national media, everything is really giving so much airtime and press time during the election, so everybody can expect that they are aware of what's happening in the country during elections.
Yes.
But for overseas voting, um, of course, foreign media, they don't really do that in the respective jurisdiction. So chances are, if your citizens, they are not well engaged with a Philippine or with the local media, or they don't watch local news anymore, or in their social media, their algorithms are already out of the loop from whatever is happening from their home country. Chances are they will not be able to get much information on what to expect during the election. So they may not be fully aware of what would be happening or what to expect in the coming election. So for us in the Philippines, in order to address that, we've really doing a lot of voter ed campaigns, and we are actually starting most of our voter education campaigns now for the
Mhm.
28 elections as well, because it's a presidential elections. We want everything to be smooth. So as early as now, we are already rolling out a lot of our town hall discussions with Filipino communities all over the world. During the 2025 elections, we really did our best to coordinate with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, embassies, and consulates to organize these town hall meetings. So even
Mhm.
if it's midnight here in the Philippines and it's the other way around in the other side of the world, we would be attending all those town halls in order to directly address the issues or the questions that our foreign Filipinos would feel about this new
Yeah.
system, and also to, of
Mhm.
course, to educate them on what to expect as well.
Mm.
So those are really some of the things that have to be considered. I guess in addition as well, since we're talking about e-voting in general, right? That
Yes.
includes using of machines as well. One of the main considerations for us when we were also using electronic voting, electronic machines during voting, is really the deployment or logistics cost for us, because we have like more than 100 different consulates and embassies all over the world. So it's really costly to ship out ballots, to ship out the machines to these embassies and consulates. And mind you, we're not really deploying just one per post. We are
Yeah.
deploying several machines per post, depending on the number of Filipinos that are there as well. So it is a
Mhm.
huge cost consideration in implementing overseas voting. So we get a lot of questions as well whenever we have budget hearings in Congress, because they tend to compare the cost per voter in the Philippines, local elections, and overseas, because for us in overseas it really tends to climb up just because the costs are different. We have
Mhm.
different cost considerations in implementing overseas voting, whether it's internet or the use of machines as well. So I guess
Machine.
those three main factors are something that we really have to consider as well, or to think about for those other
Mhm.
countries that are thinking of implementing e-voting. Because yeah, the machines, they are bigger as compared to like just
Yeah.
sending out ballots, right? Because I understand Indonesia. I was in Singapore during the previous elections of Indonesia, and I was studying there, and I had classmates who served in the elections in their embassy, and I saw that they were only using paper ballots. So
Mhm.
it's other than sending ballots, of course, you have to send the machines as well, canvassing
Yeah.
machines, canvassing equipment, and they have to take into consideration how those results will be transmitted back and be counted as well in their national canvassing. So yeah, I think these countries that are considering e-voting for overseas must also think about these things. So I'm
Mhm.
happy to hear again as well from Dr. Khan from the Bangladesh experience, sir.
Yes. For Dr. Kano, with the experience of Bangladesh, can you help us walk through the process of overseas postal ballots, postal voting using the app, and what were your key takeaways from the implementation of that system? I believe you have a slide to show us for
Yeah,
this
yeah.
part.
Sure, sure. Okay. Yeah, I just have a couple of slides,
Yes.
briefly covered, so that the audience gets an overview about how we had gone about it, and what's the outcome of it, and what should be its future. Like, if any country wants to take the experience and go ahead. So a comprehensive idea, as the initial startup, that is my outlook. So I will make sure to in fact cover these aspects so that this can add value to any electoral process. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'll just share my screen. So you can see now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is about our out of country voting. We OCV, widely known as internationally, and in country postal voting we named it ICPV. So its challenges, status, challenges, difficulties, and future considerations I will be highlighting. So this is the in fact outcome. How many voters registered, and their casting. And here RO, sorry for this abbreviation, this is returning officers, though they are in fact electoral officers at the constituency level. So what happened for OCP? We had 767,000 plus approved voters, and then see from there, casting was 70.95%, and the returning officer received 64 point, around 65%. And there are issues of accepting ballots and rejection. And end of the day, it was 61.52%, those were accepted at the vote counting end. So overall is 70.25%, including in-country affairs. There are some issues here, like undelivered return to Bangladesh is 132,000 plus, and rejected by returning officers during counting 57. So we have in fact found out by now what was the reason of these figures, because we delivered it for the first time. But now we know exactly from which country it came back, and what are the reasons. Is it with the issue of sending, tracking, or issue of local post office in respective countries, or some issues at the postal department in Bangladesh, and in the counting issues, like is it the mistake of voters, or is it the issue of the administrative channel. So all this in fact, now you are this is our debriefing is ongoing, so you are working on it to minimize this in future.
Mhm.
This is the total high level process flow. So enrollment was opened 45 days before the registration, 40 days before the in fact, we had 45 days registration period. Sorry, so it was 90 days before the election, and the window was open for 45 days for registration, and then personalization took place by the Bangladesh Postal Department for outbound and return envelopes, and of course we had to follow UPU, Universal Postal Union System, and guidelines. Then these were delivered to voters 45 days before election, because we carried out a research about what went wrong before in past elections. We found that voters did not get much time to cast vote, so to send the ballots and getting it back. So we had to, in fact, adjust our law to cover all this timeline. So after they received the ballots, we had sent, in fact, a symbol-based ballots, one type of ballot for all overseas voters. But in our country, postal voting, we had sent vote, as per the constituency. So candidates vis-a-vis, as per constituencies, candidates with respective symbol. So in country they received. So login, scanning, then we had to make sure that they have liveliness check everywhere. When they open up app, login, they had to make sure they have liveliness check, and this was connected with our national ID system. So necessary authorization, everything was undertaken. And then during the voting process, after receipt of the ballots, they were casting the vote manually. This is very important. So
Mhm.
what we did, IT was, for registration and tracking of ballots,
Mhm.
sending the ballots to voters, and return journey. These were in the tracking system, including when it is received by the electoral officials. That part was also within the IT. But actual casting of vote was manual, and that we, through liveliness check, we made sure that voters are verified. And here what happened, the all voters, we did not in fact say that we had transparency, we had, voting integrity. We don't have to say ourselves. Voters themselves, in fact, widely circulated that this system, through this system, voters voting has been, well and proper executed, and respective voters have cast their vote. uh, Other than voters, none could cast the vote. So, and
Mhm.
this arrangement, the casting, we opened 21 days before the election, and then they, in fact, do their voting part, seal the envelope, and drop it in the nearest, post office in respective countries. So, and it came gradually to Bangladesh, and then going to respective electoral officers, then scanning process, and then counting. Counting was on the day of election only. So this I have. So this is the key considerations. The enrollment from abroad took place. We had to, the voters had to give their international mobile number, and through that the numbers were verified. At that time, we did not introduce email because our category of voters abroad. But by now, we have also introduced email for respective voters. Then the national ID verification, liveliness check was part and parcel, and every individual had their QR code. And with that QR code, in fact, we tracked entire system. When the voter received the ballots, they had to scan the QR code, and when they scan, a system made sure that it is the voter himself or herself have scanned the, ballot paper, or the return, or the two envelopes we delivered, that one. So cyber security awareness tips, we had to give it with the app, and the location was, geolocation was enabled always. So, and we made it mandatory for overseas voters during the registration process from where they enrolled. That location has to be there during the, in fact, voting process as well. This is the security, one of the questions we have today to discuss. But just to give an overview about everything, whatever is required to safeguard the voter, safeguard the mobile app, safeguard the IT infrastructure. Everything was in place. So we had collaboration of cyber incidents response team partnership at the government, and we had international partner as well. So what happened? We had three layers. First is in-house team had their own way of doing things, and then parallelly we had the government body to under for cyber security related partnership, security testing, all this, and additionally we had international partner, so that we have we the trust issue, compliance issue at the international level can be maintained. About the data security, about the leakage, all these, that was the topmost, considerations. So protection of data remain in Bangladesh cloud. Then, of course, it was government cloud. We had to had some address info issues of the voters, because in our case the voters do not the workers, especially the migrant workers, they reside collectively in a single place in different parts of the world, so that we had to take care. And electronic KYC, yeah, through KYC, in fact, everything was ensured is verification authorization part. This was the portal we had, covering the entire world, and it was open. Still now, if you browse through this, you can browse and have a total picture about what happened in out of country and in country postal voting. So this is just a glimpse, and we opened it. So openness was one of the key, and with this we have now experience of 123 countries, and now we are working on it, so that in future we can address country by country. These are just a few aspects about our analysis. Like, we had a deliberate coordination: Bangladesh Election Commission, Bangladesh Postal Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh embassies abroad, foreign postal departments of respective countries, foreign concerned ministries department, and Universal Postal Union. So we had gone for all out coordination mechanism, so that first is to reach out to voters. So we did it. We had multi-prong efforts. So it's not only through embassy channel; it's through Bangladeshi diaspora communities, community leaders. We tried, but we what lessons we learned from here is we have to start this sort of coordination mechanism at least 6 months before the national parliament election. So enrollment voters I mentioned, in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia we have 31% enrolled, and 11 countries we have 85% enrollment, 20 countries 96, Middle Eastern countries 60%. So with Philippines, Indonesia, I think more or less it will be in the same tune or same footing, but there could be some difference in some of the countries. So Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea 15% enrollment. Belarus received by electoral office 80 from 85 countries we received. Then we did not receive from 26 countries, from Africa, South American countries. It is because of postal system in different countries, and the like North America, Europe, Asian countries. The system for South America, of course, is the distance was a big issue, but for African countries, the entire system is not at par in some of the countries with the other countries of the world. Then 56 countries we had more than 100 voters enrolled. Then countries apply local postal policies overlooking UPO guidelines. That's very important. Universal Postal Union, they have a guideline for all countries, but basing on that guideline or not, some of the countries have developed their own local policy, and we had to follow those policies. So we did not know it when we were implementing this. So during implementation we came to know we had to address So now we are thinking that Bangladesh Postal Department needs to have bilateral agreement with those countries who had
Mhm.
local policies.
Mhm.
And some of the countries there was no coordination. Ballots were sent, returned flawlessly. So
Mhm.
those countries, mostly European countries, and challenges, difficulties. Some of them are here. I mentioned about during the considerations the digital literacy of voters, voters education, awareness campaign,
Mhm.
SMS abuse in large scale. This is a cyber threat, cyber attack. So initially we planned, we opened the app region wise, 8 country, 10 countries, 20 countries together, something like this. Then we had to open for the entire world. When we opened before entire world to speed up the registration process, we found that cyber attack is day-to-day affairs, especially SMS abuse. So
Mhm.
we have to take some measures to take care of this. Then address of voters, migrant workers, this is an issue. In single address, you send 100,000 ballots, So, the people who are not aware about this, especially the political parties. But later on, after some motivation, some campaigning, we had to address this. We could, earn the confidence. Tracking system, in fact, was not, always in place in some
Mhm.
cases because of UPO BDO system was integrated, but during return ballot especially. So
Mhm.
then the local policy of postal department I mentioned, and about the UPO guidelines, all this I already mentioned. Finally, about issues
Mhm.
for future considerations, I just have a couple of points about
Mhm.
candidates. How do they reach out to overseas voters? So for
Mhm.
data privacy, we did not share any information of voters, their mobile number, their address in respective countries. In Bangladesh, in the voter list, they get the address of voters, so they can access, candidates can campaign. But here we say
Mhm.
no, through their beneficiaries. In your constituency who are residing abroad. So through beneficiaries, you do your campaign part. So this is an issue. And we are saying now the postal voting can be continued this system in Asia, North America, Oceania, and European
Mhm.
countries. Some like 8 countries, we had 80 around 90% presence of overseas voters. So we are thinking at how we can reach 100% voters and what should be the mechanism. And about
Mhm.
e-voting, our in fact initial impression is we need to go for e-voting, especially for Africa, South America, and other countries where we have less than 100 voters enrollment, and military personnel, of course, their overseas deployment. So this part, if we go for, we are developing now e-voting system. So this part, we
Mhm.
are thinking that the number of voters will not, and if they cast 100% voters of these countries, it won't affect the election result in any
Mhm.
constituency. So people will trust people. So, but overseas voters would be able to exercise their voting rights. That's important through online
Mhm.
voting system, and above all, the mobile app, which has been designed, developed, and implemented for overseas voting purposes. This can be used for extending citizen services all over the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
Thereby, the app remains live throughout the year,
Mhm.
election, and it's not election to election.
Yeah.
So through that, in fact, all these are citizen service extension can be possible. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. I took I think maybe more time, but I tried to cover everything. Thanks a lot.
It's okay. We'll just discuss two more topics that you've already mentioned actually about related to trust building, which is transparency and also security of the system. Firstly, on transparency. Of course, when you consider e-voting systems, as you incorporate technologies more into these election systems, parts of the electoral process become more opaque. Like for the example of a voter, before you when you cast your vote, you vote using a paper, you see the ballot, you experience it first time, you put it in the ballot box. You even see how it is counted in in voting areas. No. But with the use of technology, it becomes less opaque. It becomes more opaque somehow because parts of those processes are not seen as they usually experienced by voters. No, but what have been good practices in ensuring the integrity of the e-voting process when it comes to implementing standards related to transparency? Maybe we can start with Director Ian.
Yes. So I think I can share with the Philippine experience, not just with internet voting, but with the whole electronic voting process in the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines. So as I mentioned earlier, from the very start of the process, from procurement of the system that's going to be used, everything is made available to the public, from the terms of reference to the bidding process itself, how the provider is going to be chosen or selected based on public bidding.
Mm-hmm.
And once we have already selected the what we call this, the service provider, the customization process is also made transparent. So all the testing, the codes of the system, the source code of the system is also made available to the public. Actually, what we do is we have local source code reviews on top of an international certification entity which is independent as well in
Mm-hmm.
checking the source code of the system to make sure that the system actually counts correctly and that there are no malicious codes that is being placed in the vote counting system. And then the whole process itself, we always invite foreign independent observers.
Mm-hmm.
We are strong in our partnerships as well with our non-government organizations here in the Philippines. ANFREL is also part of the election observing team as well as our local partners in the Philippines to
Mm-hmm.
observe every process of the elections. And after the elections itself, we also conduct random manual audit, which actually manually counts the paper ballots and
Mm-hmm.
compare the results on how the system has actually counted those ballots. So they randomly pick precincts, and then all those ballots that were fed into the machine are manually counted and compared to the how the system has counted, how the machines have counted those ballots. And for internet voting, we also did an election verifying. So we run a code to verify that the system was actually counting correctly, and everything was really made available to the public as well. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, one great thing, as I mentioned earlier as well, is really to educate the public, because as
Yes.
you mentioned, paper ballots is very much direct. You don't have to explain
Mm-hmm.
anything. You see it, you count
Yes.
it. It's pretty much as it is. But for e-voting, we really have to make the public understand what
Mm-hmm.
the process is from start to finish. I remember way back when we started e-voting in the Philippines, the media was really a lot of huge help in educating the public as well. So
Mm-hmm.
they conducted their own voter education campaigns. If you remember, before there was a campaign by this huge media company about the itlog, because
Yes, I know.
the shape required for the ballot is shaped like an egg. So itlog is like an egg. So they say
Yes.
how to properly shade the ballots. So with the help of not just the media as well, but of course our citizens' arms in elections. There've been a lot of voter education campaigns on the grassroots, telling the people how to go about with their voting, with the process. And I guess as compared to when we started e-voting as to now, the people are very much familiar now. In fact, since we're still doing barangay elections in its manual, I think
Mm-hmm.
they kind of expect to see machines already in the polling
Ah,
precincts as compared to getting a paper ballot that you have to write on. So we always have to remind the electorate that for barangay it's different than what you have been used to with the national elections. So and that's also what we expect as well as we continue to move forward with internet voting for overseas. That the more that the people are getting familiar, so yeah, for now the effort would really go um, to really educating the public as well, because if they
mm-hmm.
are aware or they know what how the system works, what to
Yes.
expect, it's also difficult for them to be misled by
Mm-hmm.
disinformation,
Yes.
and they would trust the system as well because they themselves can explain what happens from the start to finish as well. So
Mhm.
it sounds so easy to do, but it is really quite a very difficult challenge for us, because as I mentioned, we don't really we cannot really interact with our overseas Filipinos quite directly as
Yes.
compared to here those who are here in the Philippines. So it will take. We understand that it may take longer time,
Mhm.
but that's why on our end we want to start as early as possible in our voter education campaigns to reach as many Filipino communities all over the world as much as possible, as wide as possible, so that we can spread the proper information and educate them properly, and tell them as well what are the audit mechanisms that we have in place that they can
Yes.
also participate in, so that they themselves, just what they used to seeing the paper ballots, that there's actually those kinds of mechanisms as well that they can participate in even remotely, to see the process that we are doing and for them to understand it. So I think that's
Mm.
my take on that one.
That's good. Just wanted to add, no, I was in the embassy the other day to renew my passport, and I think I saw that there is an ongoing voter registration for overseas Filipino
Yes, yes,
voters.
yes,
So
yes, yes.
for those who are overseas Filipino voters listening to this podcast, maybe you can consider registering to vote for the next election, right? And I also like the note about the song. I still remember that song. That campaign is very effective. The may bilog na hugis itlog.
Yes, 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 yes.
That was a very effective campaign, I would say. To Dr. Khan, I just wanted to follow up on your presentation because I know you've mentioned about, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, that there is a QR code that the voters, overseas voters, can scan so that they know that the ballot that they sent, the postal ballot that they sent, would be received. I was just wondering, with the QR code, would people be able to track it back to the voters or not?
Oh, okay, thank you. So what happened? Like we had one envelope that's in white color. So that was, outgoing from Bangladesh part. So
Yes.
where the address of voters, according to their, registration, which they mentioned, that address was printed. And inside this envelope, we had the return envelope that's in yellow color.
Mm-hmm.
So the in fact address of the returning officer or the electoral officer, according to the constituency of that particular voter, that was in fact printed there. So in
Mm-hmm.
these two envelopes, we had QR code for each voter. So
Mm-hmm.
this QR code was connected to the entire system. So when they receive it, say I sent it from Dhaka by air to Philippines, for example.
Yes.
So in Philippine Bangladeshi voter, one of the voters, so he or she scans it first after receipt,
Mm-hmm.
and when he or she scans, our system in fact detects it or endorses it that this has been scanned by specific voter. But this scanning process had 3 4 steps. One is
Mm-hmm.
he or she has to log in, then undertake the liveliness check, and after liveness check there is other verification mechanism, and then only he or she can scan QR code. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that the envelope is there and just scans it. No, he or she has to log in, do some process of verification.
Mm-hmm.
Thereafter, the QR code shows up in the system, but he or she scans, manually on the envelope. So each and every voter had, their unique QR code, and this
Mm-hmm.
QR code arrangement we mentioned in our act when we had passed the act of postal voting IT supported. This particular sentence was mentioned that each and every voter will have their own unique QR code as their
Mm-hmm.
identity. So what happened? So they received that. So during casting of vote also same thing. They had to undertake some verification process. Then QR code scanning takes place, and thereafter the voting part manually was done by voters. So and then he or she puts it in the envelope, return envelope. And when
Mm-hmm.
this return envelope comes to Bangladesh, the postal department at the airport scans it. So and in the system is updated, and then internal journey delivery process takes place, and it goes to the district level or constituency level returning officers or electoral officers. There they
Mhm.
scan it, and we synchronize, and when we find that entire journey is completed, then it goes for counting. And counting process was after the scheduled time of election. It was 4:30 p.m. for Bangladesh. So, and in counting process it was 100% manual. So
Mhm.
whatever, so this QR code was a tracking process, not only for the tracking of ballots, plus the verification of voters were made sure
Voting.
through this QR code.
I see. I am aware of time, so I'm going to ask my last question. No, another key concern when it comes to e-voting systems is, of course, the security, as there are risks of data leaks, hacking, as you've also already mentioned, and manipulation. What are security standards that should be implemented when it comes to considering e-voting systems? Maybe we can start with Dr. Khan first.
Okay, thanks again. So security, actually, this is the topmost considerations we had to take care. We do have, cyber security standards in place. Those are international standards.
Mm-hmm.
So you apply everything, but what happens? Whatever you do, the attackers, hackers, they have their way to, get into your system. So that is why the cyber security team has to be very very strong. Their vigilance, AI based approach, so that you first you have to detect, then detect, respond. There is a sequence. So this has to be followed every time. So there are standards, you follow any standard, but end of the day the vigilance of team, the knowledge of the cyber security team, and the compliance requirement, those has to be in place. And additionally, the with security I would add the audit part. The In fact, the citizens, the voters, the political parties, the IT, in fact, wizards. If you open up the system in
Mm-hmm.
any step of voting process, be it registration, be it voting, be it return of ballots, whatever it is, you open it for entered world, and to see whether the labs, is there any breach of security anytime. So that is why you had here investment comes. This We need to invest on security too. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to balance, in fact, the rolling out of postal voting IT supported or e-voting and security.
Mm-hmm.
In my view, like we have regular voting, people go to cast their vote in polling centers, polling stations, and it incurs money. There is no doubt. But if you compare and invest this in technology, you will find you have a best possible system of security. And end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, if there is a political consensus, that's very important, and openness
Yes.
would will solve all problems. So political consensus, political intention, we will take it through when you use technology in voting process. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Director Ian.
Yes. So I guess one, as yeah, Dr. Khan has correctly mentioned that, especially now that everyone is kind of knowledgeable when it comes to technology, when it comes to the internet. So hacking is really something that is always present. So on the end of the election management body, it's always how do you manage and lessen or reduce the risks as well, right? So
Yes.
I think one of the good practices that what we have here in the Philippines is we don't really have the system online all the time. I mean, we're only connected online when we already canvass the results and transmit the results to the national canvassing or to the regional, provincial canvassers. So the whole day that voting is happening, the machines are what they call is autonomous, but
Yes.
they're not connected to the internet, so
Mm-hmm.
nobody can hack. That's something that's not really connected as well. And of course, all throughout the process of configuring the system, all types of attacks or something are being tested as well on the system, so that you can see firsthand how resilient the system is. You should always be able to make sure that you have redundancies in place. For internet voting, on the other hand, where the system is always online 24/7 for a month, um, one of the things that we did is, of course, the portal that was available to the public was really just about for them to vote. So nobody, the public is not allowed to have access on the like the storage of the ballots per se. So it's something that is not made available to the public to be accessed. But of course, everything will be auditable, as what Dr. Carlos mentioned earlier. We make sure that everything is auditable. All the processes that are being undertaken in the system is logged, so we can always see what is happening with the system every second, every day, 24/7. And then, of course, we could be notified if there are any malicious attacks that are being done with the system as well. So there's continuous 24/7 monitoring, and we made sure that we have personnel that was present during those 30-day voting period to make sure that everything is in place. Before we launched the system as well, we conducted a lot of vulnerability penetration testing for the internet voting system, and it was done by a different agency as well for the Philippines, so to make sure that there is independent and world-class standard as far as the testing is concerned, so that the public will not say that it's just us who's testing and then it would be the results would be self-serving. So it's not like that. As I mentioned earlier, we also, on top of that, we also had, and it's part of the law that is being required for us to have an international certifier to certify the system as well. So and on top of that, as I mentioned, there is a local source code review that is being done. So we invite members of the IT community from all over the Philippines, and it's made available to the public as well. So they can also even invite like tech experts all over the world to test, to see the system, to see its vulnerabilities, and then we answer it and we resolve it along the way as well before we actually launch the system. So those are the things that we are actually practicing to reduce and to lower and to even maybe eliminate the risks of internet vulnerabilities in the security of the system.
Okay. Thank you, Director Ian and Dr. Khan, for joining us today. I won't take much of your time. I think we've promised an episode that is for just an hour. You usually have it for an hour, and we did. But thank you for sharing your insights this afternoon, this morning, this afternoon. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I would have to hide you from the stream so that I can close this episode. But thank you.
Thank you,
Very
thank you,
much. Thanks, Eddie.
thank you, Dr. Khan. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, and that has been the Election Observer podcast episode on key considerations, factors, and risks in deploying and implementing e-voting systems. There's one particular takeaway that I wanted to share, no, and wanted to echo in that in developing these systems, you have to consider, of course, you have to design for the voters and not just for the convenience of administrative convenience. That's a good consideration, of course, no. We, of course, want to thank again Director Ian and Dr. Khan for sharing their experience of the Philippines and Bangladesh. Get the latest news and updates about ANFREL programs and activities through our Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and TikTok pages. You can also subscribe to our YouTube and WhatsApp channel. Thank you for joining us again today, and thank you for being part of the show for 3 seasons. This is our third season. No, we'll return soon with new episodes, but in the meantime, please follow the Election Observer podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stream all the episodes. I have been your host, John Antiquera. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.